Oh, sure. I screwed stuff up. Okay, to respond to this first, I want to go where I'll get to right to what Joe said there, sort of in the spirit of it. But notice how in all of this talk about jobs, I can talk about the specific job numbers. Yes, unemployment numbers look like they're doing okay. That's because it doesn't count people that are no longer trying to get work. Labor force participation is still lower than it was in pre-pandemic levels.
Okay, yeah, Rob doesn't know anything about economics either. I'm so sorry. Okay, just as a quick thing, okay? When we talk about unemployment in the United States, there are different numbers that you can talk about. There are different ways that you can measure unemployment. So, for instance, let's imagine an economy with 100 million people, and let's say that 50 million people are working in that economy, okay? Well, is that 50% unemployment? Well, let's think for a moment. Okay, do we count people under the age of 18, right? Should we count a 1-year-old as being unemployed? Well, okay, probably not. Okay, so let's knock off children. What about people who are over the age of retirement, over 65, right? Okay, sure, probably not. What about people who are, let's say you have a mom who's staying at home, who's taking care of a kid, or let's say that you've got a guy who, financial independence and retire early, whatever, one of these people, right? Let's say that they retire at 35 or 40, or let's say that you've got, 3 or 4 roommates, they're all living together, and one guy's like, I'm going to take a year off. I got money saved up. Fuck it. I don't care. I'm not going to work. I'm just going to hang out, whatever. Do you want to count these people in your unemployment numbers if they're not looking for work, right? Probably not. So there are different ways, or you could if you wanted to. There are different ways to measure unemployment. I think they use all the U's, at least 1 through 6, but the way that we refer to unemployment in the United States is usually called the U3 number, okay, which is our shorthand for unemployment. Unemployment rate in the United States is the U3 unemployment, which excludes people not seeking work from that number, okay? Now, every now and then, somebody will come out and somebody will give this ingenious take where they're saying, well, actually, that's not the real unemployment in the United States. Actually, the number's actually way fucking higher, and nobody's actually talking about this, okay? And they're usually citing something like, I don't know if it's called the U6. I think U6 and labor force participation rate are different, but these numbers basically always track each other. Like if you overlap them, if you look at them, like they're generally pretty similar. You're not getting these massively huge spikes in U6 in a way that has never been seen before, like U3. No, they're generally like they kind of track. When you talk about something like, let's look at the St. Louis Fed Labor Force Participate, LBPR. How is the U6 different? I think the U6 includes, labor force participation rate, right? I think the U6 includes discouraged workers. I don't know what other types of workers they include, but to be honest, you're dating yourself. Nobody says that shit talking point. Rob literally just said this shit talking point. Let me check real quick. What is labor force participation rate? Wait. It's defined by the current population survey as the number of people in the labor force as a percentage of the civilian non-institutional population. The participation rate is a percentage of the population that is either working or actively looking for work. I'm trying to think if this is the one that includes, I'm thinking this is the one that has senior citizens factored in, right? Investopedia. Hold on one second. The U.S. government's labor force participation rate formula is the number of people age 16 and older who are employed or actively seeking employment divided by the total non-institutionalized civilian working age population. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind as you get more and more people that are getting older, because our population is a little top heavy, I think because of the baby boomers, even if everything in the economy more or less stays the same per age bracket as a percentage, you would expect to see labor force participation rate drop off a bit because older people are more likely to be retired and not wanting to work anymore than younger people. But I believe labor force participation rate will still factor these people in. So when you're looking at this here, you're seeing that the labor force participation rate is lower, 62, 63%, than it was throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s. This is to be expected somewhat. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that that the number right now is good or that these numbers were bad. I'm just saying that labor force participation, when somebody pulls this number out, you need to be very suspicious of why are we talking labor force participation rate. You're probably going to need to bring another number out if we're going to talk about this, because this number here is going to be heavily biased towards certain age groups of people. That's just a thing to keep in mind. Whenever you hear somebody bring up the secret unemployment numbers, like the forbidden unemployment that nobody's allowed to talk about, usually they're talking about labor force participation rate, and there's a reason why we don't usually use that number to just take a snapshot of the economy. Yeah.
Happened was a lot of numbers. I want to go where I'll get to right to what Joe said there, sort of in the spirit of it. But notice how in all of this talk about jobs, I could talk about the specific job numbers. Yes, unemployment numbers look like they're doing okay. That's because it doesn't count people that are no longer trying to get work. Labor force participation is
like unemployment has never counted people. Well, or I don't know when the U3 started, but unemployment doesn't count people not looking for work. U3 unemployment has always been like that. When you talk about unemployment rate in the United States, you're talking about the U3. The U3 doesn't include discouraged workers. It hasn't. It just doesn't. That's just not how the U3 works. Okay, I don't know, but it doesn't give the definition here, but yeah. But the U3, when people talk about unemployment rate in the United States, it just doesn't. It just doesn't measure discouraged workers, people not seeking work.
Is still lower than it was in pre-pandemic levels. What happened was a lot of people got so frustrated after the lockdowns and things like that that they never tried to go back to work. In addition to increased welfare benefits and PPP loans and other stimulus checks that were sending them, many people never went back to work. So unemployment numbers look way better than they actually are. The real unemployment number is probably around 7%. And none of
like saying anytime somebody says real unemployment, they're always full of shit. That's always a fucking lie. When somebody says real unemployment, that means that they're engaged in some propaganda bullshit every single fucking time. There were people that quit after COVID and didn't come back, but a lot of those people are also people that were just like, fuck it, I'm retiring now and I'm done. I'm out, right? You can, somebody linked this. Yeah, I don't know how PPP loans are making people not go back to work. PPP loans were offering money to employers to literally keep people on payroll, so I don't know what that means. Well, I do. It means he's full of shit. Population pyramid for the United States, 2000, 2010, and 2020. So you can kind of see, I guess you've got like this bump here of people that are getting older from 40 to 39. You've got this little bump here that I think this is 2010. So 35 to 44, this bump moves up here from like 49 to 54, and now it's moved up here from like 59 to 64. This is 2020, I guess, right? So as it gets, as time moves on and this bump moves up, again, labor force participation rate is going to drop, but that's not bad. It just means we've got more older people who are probably going to be retired, right? And we're not making as many younger people. So
none of that matters anyways. The fact that you have to work multiple jobs and we count each of those multiple jobs as a job, but people still real wage growth is barely moving.
I don't know what that had to do with anything, but okay.
The needle since the Harris-Biden administration, where under Trump it was going up by leaps and bounds. So people know, and that's why all the polling shows that people feel they were economically better under the Trump administration than under the Harris-Biden administration, which is why what I said, which Pisco deflected from, was no one wants to talk about that. Instead, you'll talk about one random policy. Oh, they're going to spend money and build houses, that's it. And the rest of it will be, as you've seen IRI try to do here, make excuses that in the first term, congressional term, when Harris and Biden were there, where they controlled the House and had the tiebreaker in the Senate, they didn't do any of this shit. And what
I'm pretty sure they were probably trying to take the country up from underneath the avalanche that was COVID, that the entire world was dealing with. Wouldn't that be a self-report on Trump admin too, since they also use the same U3? Everybody uses U3. Yeah, that's the unemployment rate. Everybody uses the U3. It's stupid whenever somebody says real unemployment and they're not an economist, or they could be an economist and they're talking shit too, but yeah.
what's IRI?
Actual defense a Democrat can give as to why so many Americans are struggling? There is none. You have to thread the needle on that so unbelievably fucking carefully. It's hard to speak to that because the reality is most Americans aren't struggling, but people feel that way and they talk about it a lot on social media. So you have to be incredibly careful how you talk about that because you have to feed into the delusions of the public while also being realistic and reasonable. Remember, there's a ton of Republicans that thought that the economy flipped completely 180 the very microsecond Biden assumed office. And then all of a sudden the economy became horrible. And it's like, wait, really? But so, yeah, I don't know. There are issues with the economy and there are issues that need to be addressed, especially stuff probably relating to housing, maybe education, but people that have this idea that like everything is unaffordable and everything is fucked and when it's just not, it doesn't show up in any data anywhere. And then people spend all this time trying to like, well, it's just like, yeah, it's a difficult needle to thread.
next thing he did was the tax cuts that the Republicans had been clamoring to do for decades. And then what did he get done after that? What were his major signature pieces of legislation? You really want to compare the legislative track record between Biden and Trump?
During your question, why hasn't Biden admin removed the Trump tariffs? Colin was asked about this, but she somewhat dodged the question of the debate. I don't even know which Trump tariffs there were or what hasn't been removed. I'm not sure. We can find out. Trump tariffs. Could things be better for people even if it isn't horrible? Things can always be better. Yeah, of course. There must be like a State Department website where you can see like all the current U.S. tariffs or something, right? I would imagine. You might just not familiar. Oh, somebody made a post on the subreddit about this. Oh, okay. This would have been what I thought, but. Oh, this is true as well. Even though tariffs are bad economic policy, people do like tariffs. They sound good in principle. It sounds awesome because nobody really knows what a tariff is. But if you start tariffing and then you get retaliatory tariffs, you can't really just get rid of your tariff. You have to reach an agreement with the other side so that you both get rid of them. Otherwise, you're going to fuck yourself over. Yeah.
Trump?
Yeah, give me 30 seconds. Okay, give me 30 seconds. I'll answer this. Because what Kamala Harris is running on is being an agent of change. What you can't get around is the American people know that economically and security-wise, they were better off under a Trump administration than a Harris administration. So what's happening is the Harris administration is trying to run on, we're the agents of change. Things will be different. To why I say then why, if she's been there in charge for 4 years, haven't they done any of these things?
I wonder if anybody will ever deal with the fact that Republicans never have to answer for their wild deficit spending. If the economy was so fucking good under Donald Trump, why did he have to deficit spend so much? Why couldn't they balance the budget? When Donald Trump's first budget would have been after 2017? Like, why did we have to have these? Can I go back a little further? Didn't Obama reduce the deficit by 2/3? No shot. But Obama definitely deficit spent. Federal surplus or deficit. Okay, so surplus is above the line, and then deficit is below the line, right? Like, why was Donald Trump still deficit spending? This seems so dumb. Didn't Obama reduce the deficit by 2/3? I'm sorry. I mixed up deficit with debt. Obama did reduce the spending deficits through his administration. I'm trying to think, I don't know when the first budget you would take credit for is. So like, would it be 2008 or would it be 2009? Like, I don't know how these are measured, but obviously you had the housing collapse Obama's obviously deficit spending. You're supposed to after a recession or during a recession, right? But then the deficit is decreasing, it's decreasing, it's decreasing, it's decreasing up until around 2015, 2016. It increases a bit again. And then under Donald Trump, why all this additional deficit spending? Like it's getting worse, but the economy was getting better. Why? Like the economy was doing really well under Trump, sure, but it was in part at least due to the massive deficit spending. Can you explain what deficit spending is? Deficit spending is, basically a budget for the government is, let's say that I collect $1 million in, if I knew how to use Excel, I could draw such a pretty graph of this. Let's say that for 1 year, let's say that I collect, let's call this $1 million in tax receipts, and let's say that I spend $900,000, all right? Then let's say the next year, let's say I collect $1 million in tax receipts, and then let's say that I spend, we'll say $1.1 million. Then let's say the next year, let's say we do a big tax cut. Let's say that we only get $800,000 in tax receipts, and then let's say that we spend $1 million. So you would say that for this first year, you could say we had a $100,000 surplus, a budget surplus. You'd say for this year, you had a $100,000 budget deficit. And then for this year, maybe you'd say we had a $200,000 budget deficit, okay? What that means is that the government in the very first year, I guess maybe you could say the government like deleted currency from the economy. I think it's fair to say that, right? Because the government took in $100,000 and the government's not spending that money. So if you were to have if you were to draw a graph of like the government debt, right? We'll say debt like money the government owes. Let's say that we're starting at zero. We'll say that the government is sitting on an extra 100K. Let's say that the next year we have $100,000 that the government spends extra. I don't think you would accrue any debt. You wouldn't have to issue any bonds because the government is literally just has this money sitting here, right? I don't know if it sits in a bank account or what. I mean, we've always had a debt, so I don't even know. But like you've got a wash between $100,000 surplus, $100,000 deficit, and then the next year here we have a $200,000 deficit in the budget. That means that the government has to issue debt in order to raise the money to spend that in the economy. So we have a $200,000 worth of debt. Let's say that next year the government spends and takes in the same amount of money. You'd still have this national debt, but your budget deficit would be nothing. So budget deficit is just the difference between the amount of money that you take in as the government and the amount of money that you spend as the government. Yeah. Isn't it the ultimate rhetorical blunder for Dems to pretend the economy is rough when it's not, when Republicans always say Dem economy is bad and Republican economy is good, no matter what the fact of the matter is? When the economy is the most important issue, you can't concede it on. Yeah, I don't know how you deal with that. I'm not sure. The thing is, Democrats have to play in this world. The double standard is impossible. You can't survive in a double standard world. And Republicans can always say their economies are great, and they can always say the Democratic economies are horrible, and they never get punished or fact-checked, or because Republican voters go by vibes based on how they think the economy is doing. So you're fucked. Yeah, right. I don't know how you deal with that. Yeah. Could deficit spending be thought of as another form of increasing the financial burden on citizens and another form of taxes? No. The government, it's kind of hard or weird to think about this, but government spending has nothing to do with taxes, and it has nothing to do with money from your citizens. The government spending has absolutely nothing to do with the amount of money that the government takes in. They're technically different, completely different things. But if the government is spending more than they take in through money, then they have to issue debt in order to cover the expenditures. Now, if the government is taking in more money than they're spending, arguably that's more taxing on the citizens because it means citizens gave up more in taxes than what the government would need to cover their expenditures. But if the government is spending more, then you have to pay that back in the future. You don't have to. Well, you kind of have. You should. You probably have to. Nobody knows right now. But you have to pay that back in the form of interest payments and in the form of paying debt back in the future. So, yeah, so extra expenditures help the economy and they help citizens, but it has to be paid back at some point probably. But there's nothing wrong with deploying debt, even that you have to pay back in the future, because you could have a net present value plus investment means that it's better to spend the money now and assume debt than it would be to just not spend any of the money and not grow your economy instead. But that's more fundamental economic bullshit. Yeah. Can you explain what taxes? I don't know what that question means. Do you think people feel like the economy is bad because they're seeing inflationary results in the commodities that they most often buy? Like if the stock market is shit, not everybody's going to feel it immediately. But if the price of a Big Mac rose by $4, then everyone is going to say the economy is shit. Yeah, I mean, things like that. There are items like that people see the price go up and they feel bad about it. But people are also just retarded. I don't know what else to say. I remember my grandpa used to say to me shit like, yeah, when I was growing up, gas was like 50 cents or whatever a gallon. And now look, it's like $2. It's crazy. And I was like, okay, grandpa, but when you were growing up, I mean, like $1 was worth a lot. Like things were different, right? Like people don't intuitively understand inflation. It just feels bad. And then what do you do? Yeah. So deficit is based on the yearly budget, while debt refers to each cumulative year. Yeah. Instead of deficit, you should just think of it as a shortfall. A deficit is a budget shortfall, and a budget surplus means that you got more money than you needed to spend. It's a surplus, right? But the debt and the deficit are two different things. That's why Bill Clinton, we still had a big national debt, but he was posting budget surpluses. But when somebody says like Obama cut the budget deficit, that means that Obama is decreasing the amount of new debt being accrued every single year, accrued. No, incurred. He's decreasing the deficit that he's incurring is decreasing, meaning he's borrowing less and less every year, but the debt is still increasing every single year because there's still money being borrowed. It would be like saying I cut down on my credit card spending. I spent $10,000 last month and only $5,000 this month, but you're still spending on a credit card, if that makes sense. Yeah. Isn't the issue that people have with inflation is that people's wages aren't keeping up with the inflation rate? Maybe, but it's really, 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 really hard to measure. It's hard to measure all of that. All of it is incredibly difficult to measure because we've gone over this before. Like there are some things that it's hard to capture this on a graph. It's hard to capture it in an individual's life. It's hard to capture a lot of this stuff. Like for instance, so like you have this weird thing happening where during COVID, real median wages were at like all-time highs. So that seems really good. But then I think Rob might have just even used this talking point. Wages haven't recovered in the Biden-Harris administration. Real median wages have indeed fallen. But again, you have to think about the number. You have to think about what we're measuring here. The median weekly wages, the median number, the middle point number of all the wages in the economy, right? If I had an economy where I had 10 people that were all earning $100,000 a year, and I had 100 people who were all earning $30,000 a year, right? If I were to just kill 50 of these people, I've boosted my median earnings so much. Or if I fire 50 people, right? Because if we fire 50 people, well, technically if median is the middle point here, actually we wouldn't have changed our median earnings, but you get the point. It's not going to be as bifurcated as this. But if you remove a lot of people from the economy or add a lot of people to the economy that aren't making that much money, then you're dramatically shifting your median wages without actually doing a good thing or a bad thing necessarily. You're just doing a thing. So Econoboy called this composition effects. Okay, maybe. That might be the technical term for it, composition effect. So like here during the height of COVID, who's still working? Service workers aren't working. All of them got fired or they got laid off or they got whatever because they were fucked. But work from home people, software developers, white collar workers, whatever, people that could do work from home jobs, they were still working. Their jobs pay better, right? As jobs started to get added back into the economy, we started to rehire service workers, we started to rehire construction workers, all these people. These people don't make as much money as these people. So we saw the median earnings drop, but this was good. It's not good because the median earnings dropped. It was good because the economy was adding back more jobs. They just happen to be lower paying jobs, right? So it's hard to capture all of this as a snapshot. People look at the consumer pricing index, so how much would it cost to pay for a certain basket of goods, although some people do, what is a CPI minus housing? Some people do like CPI without housing costs, or the CPI. Is CPI the one that doesn't include housing costs? Or there's another index that's like CPI I think minus housing. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to measure this. It's very, very, very complicated. Is it core CPI? Isn't deficit spending necessarily inflationary? When the U.S. government spends more than it has collected, isn't it injecting into the economy money that wasn't already there? Yeah, but if the economy is creating more goods and services to buy, remember, inflation means, in a very, very, very simple sense, in a very reductive and pointless sense, you can say that inflation means you've got more money chasing fewer supplies, but it could also mean the same amount of money chasing, or I'm sorry, you could say that inflation is more money chasing the same supply, but you could also say inflation is the same amount of money chasing less supply, right? Inflation is there's two halves to this equation. So if the government were to find a way to inject money into the economy that dramatically increased the amount of goods and services produced, that could be deflationary, even though the government is injecting money into the economy, right? It's not as simple as just saying government spending equals inflation, or even saying inflation equals bad. Macroecon is gay. I can say that. It's just, there's a lot going on here. Yeah. Just, you know.
It's done that they wanted.
Have you looked into buy now, pay later loans and how they aren't included in credit scoring formulas and national statistics? So admitting I haven't ever been personally involved in these markets, but I've watched my parents do them. My impression of like buy here, pay here, stuff like that, or like layaway they used to do, any of those things are always horrible, horrible, horrible programs that are just there to abuse poor people that have bad credit that can't qualify for loans otherwise. Those are always horrible things. Don't ever participate in any of that, but in my opinion. But maybe they've changed in 20 years, but
get done. They actually got to do a lot of what they wanted. Exactly. And the American people are not happy with it. So then your counter argument, which is, well, they couldn't get things done that they wanted done, but this time they will, is bullshit, as you're admitting. They did get it.
I think people just don't get why inflation is necessary. Why can't the money's value be static or stay within a margin of variance? Isn't infinite inflation bad? Infinite inflation is bad, but I think the idea is some inflation is good because you want to encourage a velocity of money. You want to encourage money to flow through the economy, and you want to discourage people from just sitting on it and doing nothing with it. You don't want people to think that if I just stick my money in a bank and I don't spend, if I don't do anything with it, then I'm actually going to be better off than if I do anything with it. So a little bit of inflation for you to feel like nothing is happening if your money's just sitting there is good because it encourages people to invest it or to buy stuff. I don't know how Econo Boy didn't know this stuff, but you were embarrassingly wrong about capital gains tax and asset secured loans. Bring me on from Stream Disagreements. 5 minutes, in and out. Embarrassingly wrong, he says. Embarrassingly wrong. All right, turn off the stream. What do you want?
All right, muted. Hey, can you hear me good?
Yep.
Okay, so the whole capital gains tax thing, people are saying, okay, it's the whole loans thing, right? And when Econo Boy basically came in and said, hey, I don't get it. Why do you think people are even wanting this capital gains tax? And you said it has to do with money now is worth more than money later. You kind of know what I'm talking about? Vaguely remember what you said?
I feel like if he asked me that question, my response, I think, was people feel it feels bad that somebody can essentially realize a gain without paying taxes on realizing the gain, that they can take out a bunch of money now, basically in the form of a loan, without ever actually having to increase their tax basis in some investment. But
right, but of course, that loan has to be paid back eventually. And you are aware of this, of course. And your explanation for why like this is a problem is the whole money now, money later. But that doesn't make sense because banks are very aware of money now being worth more than money later, and that is priced in to the interest rate. Like completely priced into the interest rate. Wait,
hold on. Just wait. Real quick. Sanity check. What is your background?
No fancy background. What kind of background are you asking about? Education? I guess like
if I okay, so obviously, I work in a very peculiar industry, so I can't speak to norms, but my understanding is like ROI on any type of like business stuff is hopefully if you're taking out money, you're trying to make like at least 10%. For startups, it can be significantly higher, but you're trying to make a decent amount back. Banks don't lend money at 10% though.
Yeah.
So when you say it's priced in,
because if the bank doesn't lend it, then the bank can't make any money if it doesn't do anything with the money. So
sure,
it's like an economic transaction. Both people benefit.
Yeah, but the bank's goal of making money isn't to try to make at an equal amount that an investor would make money, right? Their interest rates, their goals are much lower than that, right?
Yeah, because
Well, one is because I think there's
I don't think-
legislation that bans banks. I think like certain banks from taking part in investment markets, right? I think that was a thing that happened after 2007, 2008, where banks weren't like ordinary banks that do mortgages and shit aren't allowed to also double as investment banks anymore. But I'm just saying that like if it is the case that a bank can be really happy and profitable at 2.5% or 3% for a loan, and an individual can take out loans that are asset defended essentially, right? If they can take those loans out and expect to make 10% return on their money, then they could infinitely borrow money and then pay it back with a future loan where everybody's making money.
I agree with everything you're saying,
Okay.
but it's just not it's not a problem. Like there is a reason, there is a good faith reason why there is a problem that the capital gains tax can be said to be attempting to solve, but it has to do with I'll see if you can guess it. If I clue you into estate, when someone dies, what happens to their estate? That's where the loan. See if you can think. Do you want to try, or do you want me to just say it?
I think I know what you're going to say, and I think I already know the answer to it, and I don't think you know the answer to it.
Oh yeah.
Are you
Yeah, go for
are
it.
you going to say that the big hack is actually that when people die, they can pass off investments to their children that they've never actually realized a gain in, so the children don't have to pay the taxes on the increase in tax basis?
Yeah, that's all I was going to say.
Yeah, but the
I
answer to
didn't
that is
think
that you
were right
actually
with
do have to pay the step-up in basis. It's called stepped-up basis. When an estate dies, the difference between the asset tax basis and what it's sold as when it's transferred is something that you do have to pay taxes against. The reason why we don't see that for a lot of investments or inheritances is because there's a $13 million deduction, I think, on the estate tax. So if your dad dies and he gives you a $10 million investment that he bought for $1 million, you get that investment at $10 million tax basis, and you feel like, oh my God, I just cheated the capital gains tax. But not actually. What actually happened was the estate sells the security, or rather the estate pays to step up the basis in tax, but that $9 million increase in tax basis is accounted for in the estate tax exemption.
Damn. Okay, you're cluing me in. I'm gonna look into that, but I'm satisfied knowing that you're already clued into that, and I'll do some more research on my own because I'm not an economist.
I love you, buddy. Be careful.
Thank you.
The little thing that he's talking about is called, there's a name for this. I think the estate tax exemption, I think, is on $13 million. But basically, when the owner of the estate dies, you can step up the basis using that estate tax exemption, which is why some people feel like it's a hack because, oh my God, I didn't have to pay the taxes on the capital gains of my father. But you do. It's just accounted for basically in the step up in basis. It resets the cost basis of an appreciated inherited asset for tax purposes. But okay, sorry.
I mean, at all. Well, what's
Why do we have a $13 million deductible on inheritance? Can somebody make a good case for that for me? I feel like let me check. If it truly is just like a $13 million deduction, I don't know if you can. I feel like they should probably be lower. It seems kind of crazy. You could inherit $10 million tax-free. Your steelman argument is going to be, well, I mean, all of this money has already been paid taxes on by the estate. Like, now you're going to tax it again just because the guy died. But I feel like it should. My guess is it should just be more graduated. Like, if you want to say there should be a $13 million exemption, why not just say that that you have like a progressive taxation up to $13 million? Like, maybe it starts really low, like 2%, and then 5% at 5 million, and maybe 10% at 10 million, and then when you hit 13 million, then it goes up to the ordinary whatever the estate tax is. But the exemption is fairly high. But I don't know how much money you're actually honestly recovering in a state. Like, how much money do you make on the expiration of a person? Yeah, I don't know. Buy, borrow, die, explained. I'm a private wealth attorney at an international law firm headquartered in the U.S., and I implement buy, borrow, die for a living. The short answer is yes, buy, borrow, die works, and is a devastatingly effective tax elimination strategy. Okay, but I don't want to die, so fuck this, but let's see. Okay, so you purchase an asset. He has a tax basis in the asset. Peter sells the asset. It's a realization event, and he'll be subject to income tax. The asset is a capital asset. Oh, actually, I just thought of a huge counter. I bet I know where this guy's going. Oh, and if that guy that came in actually knew anything about finance, I think I can think of actually a big counter. You shouldn't be able to pay for a step up in basis as part of the estate tax exemption because that should just be a capital gains appreciation tax. Why are you allowed to use the estate tax exemption to step up the basis? What you should do is the estate should step the basis up, and then the estate should pay the capital gains tax, and then your estate taxes should kick in. That would probably be the better argument against that. I don't know why you're allowed to apply your estate tax exemption to step the basis up of any capital asset. That seems, I don't know what the good argument is for that. Maybe there is a good argument for it, but I don't know. But I bet that's what this guy's going to talk about. Because let's say that I have a $10 million investment. I got $10 million of tax basis and a $20 million investment. Let's say that I sell that the day before I die and I pay capital gains tax on $10 million or whatever. And then I die and then I leave it to my children. They just inherit that money, but less all the money that I just paid in taxes. But let's say that I don't sell that asset and I die and I pass it on to my kids. They can use the estate tax exemption to step the basis up of that investment. And now they don't have to pay the capital gains tax. I don't know why that would be the case, but I don't know. But also, I don't know how much money you'd even be making in taxes here by getting rid of this loophole, because this loophole is only going to help you up to $13 million of stepped up basis. It's not going to help like a billionaire, I don't think. But let's see. Let's read what this guy says. I could be totally wrong, but if Peter sells the asset, it's a realization event. He'll be subject to income tax. The asset is a capital asset. Anticipated on the asset for 1 year. He'll receive long-term capital gains treatment and pay income tax at preferential rates if he sold it. Nevertheless, Peter's long-term cap gain rate would be 20%. He'd be subject to the net investment income tax at 20%. If Peter lives in Quahog, okay, don't care. So if Peter were to sell the asset and cash in his gain, he'd have a total tax liability for around $17 million, and his after-tax proceeds would be $91 million. Peter's buddy Joe overheard some of his cop buddies talking about how the ultra-wealthy never pay tax because they implement buy, borrow, die, and he shares the idea with Peter. Peter decides to look into it. Peter goes to the big city and hires a private wealth attorney who connects him with an investment banker at Quahog Sachs. The investment banker might give Peter a loan or line of credit of up to $97 million. Oh, borrow. I didn't even read this. Buy, borrow, die. Borrowing, if you borrow 10 million, to make an investment and have the investment appreciate? No. Hold on. Let's see. No, oh no, the borrow is just like living off of loans. That's what I'm thinking. Never mind. Hold on. Oh, Quahog. My bad. Quahog? Is that how do you pronounce it? He's paid no taxes. Okay, might give loan or line of credit. Okay, die. Peter's been living off the asset-backed loans / lines of credit, and his asset has continued to appreciate in value. Let's say that the value is passed with an annual rate of return of 8%. The asset now has fair market value of $740 million. When Peter dies, the base of the asset is adjusted to the asset's fair market value on Peter's date of death. In other words, Peter's base is $50 million. The asset is just $740 million. You can now sell the asset tax-free because gain is computed by subtracting adjusted basis from the sales proceeds. Can use the cash to pay back the loans. He's paid no income. Oh, I don't think this is correct. I'm either mistaken here or this guy's lying about his background, but his name is Taxonomics, and he's a mod here, so I don't think so. I don't think he'd be lying, right? There's something that's happening here that I don't understand. When Peter dies, I don't think you can step the basis up of your investment when you die for free. I think that step up in basis has to come from somewhere. You can't just be stepped up without. Ordinarily, your estate tax step up in basis comes from the estate tax exemption, I believe. Let me check. Let me keep reading. Or wait, somebody said keep reading here. Wait, hold on. Actual, if that weren't the case, the ultra wealthy wouldn't have to pay private wealth attorneys like me upwards of $2,500 an hour for their $2,500 an hour. I don't believe that, but okay. For their tax, asset protection, estate film. This type of lending is generally not economically feasible. Taxpayers a net worth exceeding around $300 million. If you're worth less than that, you're not going to be able to command attractive loan / line of credit terms from investment banks. You're going to have to get a plain vanilla product from a retail lender, which is going to have a relatively high interest rate. What is the, don't you only, I thought, doesn't Vanguard or Wells Fargo do these loans at $1 million? Or are they saying that at 300 million, you get like extra special types of loans? Hold on. Jesus Christ. No, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for secured loans. I started to bring up stuff from 40 minutes ago. With respect to inflation, you generally need both expansion of the money supply coupled with an economic event that causes a good/supply or good/service supply squeeze. Sure. I thought I saw a secured loan load. Oh, I'm sorry. What do I have load here? I know. The unified estate and gift tax exemption for 20... Oh, okay. This is a very unusual oversight because buy, borrow, die, as it exists in the real world at least, is very much an integrated tax and estate planning strategy. The unified estate and gift tax exemption for 2024 is $13.61 million per taxpayer, $27.22 million per married couple. That means you can give up to $13.6 million without paying. The above example, Peter dies with an asset worth $740 million, assuming he has no other assets or liabilities. He's going to be subject to an estate tax of $290.5 million. Peter's avoided income tax by virtue of the basis adjustment that occurs at death, but he's subject to a substantial estate tax that, in theory, serves as a backstop to make sure he pays some taxes. The conventional wisdom is that you can avoid income tax or you can avoid estate tax, but you can't do both. The conventional wisdom is wrong. I'll explain why. Hold on. I'm sorry. I got to see this. When you die, does your tax basis step up to asset value? When an asset is inherited rather than sold or gifted, the cost basis typically gets stepped up to their fair market value of the property at the date of the individual's death. But you have to pay. Don't you have to pay for that step up? According to Section 1014 of the Internal Revenue Code, if a person holds property at death, they will receive a new basis equal to the fair market value of the property at the person's date of death. In the case of appreciated assets, the rule allows people to inherit the assets such as stocks or real estate without inheriting the tax burden that's triggered by capital gains. This is known as a step-up in basis. It's in states that recognize community property laws. Married couples stand to benefit greatly. The IRS also grants the inheritor a long-term, out of step-up basis. Okay. All assets have a cost basis, which is more or less its purchase price. When an asset is sold, the difference between the cost basis and the sale price is a capital gain. Capital gains are subject to taxes. When an asset is inherited rather than sold or gifted, the cost basis typically gets stepped up to the fair market value of the property at the date of the individual's death. From a tax standpoint, it's as if the asset was purchased at the price, okay, and no taxes owed on any of the previous, okay. This is true for the person that inherits it. I'm almost positive that the estate has to pay for that step up in basis. Did I just misread this somewhere, or is this just not true? Typically, the cost basis of an asset equals the purchase price of the asset minus any adjustments. When inherit asset policy for inheritors can adjust the cost basis of the current firm of capital gains is accrued. It's recognized but not realized for the beneficiary. Okay, in other words, it's included in the value of the asset but not taxable, so on appreciation. Hence, the executor of the estate is. Consider a hypothetical inheritor named Angela who purchased a home in 1975 for $50K over the 48 years, an increase in $500K. In a will, she'll home, right? Many inherited the home, and the cost basis was adjusted to the fair market value. It was $20,000. That's 2 minutes. How much can I step up basis capital asset on death? Wouldn't this be something that varies from state to state? I thought the estate tax is a federal tax. The estate does have to pay for taxes above the exemption. Yeah, I'm thinking that a lot of this this advice is just working for the average person because the average person just never hits the actual estate tax exemption, so it feels like it's a free step up, but it's not free. The $13.61 million estate tax exemption excludes the vast majority of estates from having to pay an estate tax, but it doesn't eliminate them. If you're the executor of an estate with a gross value above $13.64 million for adding adjustable taxable gifts, subtracting the amount greater than the exemption, the excess taxable gifts. Okay, hold on. Okay, I think this is what's happening. That other site is just not mentioning it, though. I'm like 79% sure that I'm correct here. Okay. So I'm like 79% sure that this guy is not correct here. But then he's claiming that he has a job that he either doesn't have, he's lying, or I'm missing something really big that I'm just not, I don't know or I'm not understanding. What a well-advised taxpayer would do is implement an estate freezing technique early on in the buy, borrow, die game. Is tax evasion worth it? No. Tax avoidance means optimizing your tax footprint. Tax evasion implies breaking the law. Or no, it means breaking the law. It's tax evasion. I wonder if anybody in the comments corrects him on this or what they say. 18 days ago. People like me explain the loopholes to the government all the time, usually when the legislation is proposed. Taxonomics. So we're really going to throw the assets into a family limited partnership or family limited liability company. One benefit of doing that is we're going to be able to take valuation discounts when we make our gifts. Discount amounts can range depending on how aggressive the appraiser is and what discounts are available. Variably in the step plan, you'll see the discounts conglomerate around 35%. He's using a lot of abbreviations. I feel like he knows what he's talking about. Huh. That's Mr. IRS. He runs the IRS. Oh, shit. Exactly. Which part do you disagree with them on? I don't believe that this part is correct. He's got a magical part in here that makes the strategy work, and it's this. When you die, your asset's tax basis is stepped up to where the fair market value of the asset is the day that you die. However, he's saying that that step up in basis comes at no cost. I think that the step up in basis has to be paid for. So he would pay a capital gains appreciation on the difference between $740 million and $50 million. He bought the asset for $50 million, and it now has a fair market value of $740 million. To step that tax basis up, he would have to pay $690 million capital gains tax. Now, but it would actually be $690 million less $13.6 million, which is the estate tax exemption, which covers the vast majority of estates, which is why most people think that this can happen for free, but it doesn't happen when you exceed the threshold of the estate tax exemption, is my understanding. But the basis must be consistent with the estate tax return for person in general. The basis of any property for which the subsection A applies shall not exceed, in the case of property, the final value which has been determined for the tax imposed by Chapter 11. Exception, determination. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Looks like he explains how to get around that in the second part of the post. I didn't see that. I feel like I read it, but Oh, hold on. Wait. Forget everything I just said. Hold on. Wait. Oh, wait a second. Hold on. Wait, there's a whole second part. Peter buys an asset worth $50 million and transfers it to the PLG 2024 Irrevocable Trust, or Irrevocable Trust, the trust, to eliminate gift tax on the transfer. He uses $13.61 million exemption amount and a variety of sophisticated techniques. We don't really get into here. That might involve preferred freeze partners. After 10 years of appreciating at an annual rate of 8%, of the asset is worth $108 million. Borrow. Peter goes to the bank to get a loan, but now Peter doesn't have the asset to use as collateral because he transferred it to the trust. Not a problem. The trustee of the trust is going to guarantee the loan using the trust asset and as collateral. In return, Peter will pay the trust a guarantee fee, typically around 1%. Peter can transact the trust prior to Peter's death. He's going to use a loan/line of credit to obtain cash. Then he's going to exercise his power of substitution to swap the highly appreciated asset out of the trust and swap the cash into the trust. So immediately before the loan, Peter might have 0 assets, 0 liabilities. The trust will have an asset worth $780 million and no liabilities. Immediately after the loan, Peter will have perhaps $700 million cash, 90% loan to value, collateralized by the trust asset, and $700 million in liabilities. The trust will still have $700 million. The people will exercise power of substitution. Then Peter dies. Peter's gross estate includes a $700 million asset. His estate receives an indebtedness deduction for the $700 million. Oh, okay. I don't know about this. I don't know enough about structures of trust or anything, so I couldn't comment on any of this at all. This might possibly be true, but I couldn't say. If it is, it's probably not good though. But I also don't understand it, so okay. Back to this.
Illustration did was pass a Recovery Act. You could.
Can you explain why it is a good thing for someone to step the basis up to the fair market value after death? Because you don't want a new inheritor to be like subject to a whole bunch of tax liability. That feels really shitty. Imagine I die and I leave Nathan $1 million and I bought it for $1,000, $1 million asset, and I bought it for $1,000. Well, when Nathan inherits that, well, there's one of two things that has to happen. Either one, he has to immediately pay taxes on $999,000 of appreciation, because that capital gain appreciation didn't happen, or he would inherit $1 million asset with a $1,000 tax basis, which is weird because now he's carrying a whole bunch of capital gains overhead that he doesn't have any, like, it's just a lot to keep track of, maybe? I don't know, actually, why you don't inherit the lower basis. Maybe it's just complicated paperwork. It'd be weird. A bunch of people would be carrying around assets with, like, a tax basis from 200 years ago. Maybe it would just be a way to, it's just way too much lock-in, I guess. Maybe it's a lock-in effect too, right? Do you really want somebody to inherit something that if they were to sell it, they'd immediately lose 30% of it to pay capital gains? Like, it would probably do bad things to the supply of investments and money and capital and everything. That'd be my guess. I don't know. Pet honey.
Generally,
Real purpose, so rich kids can inherit more. I feel like inheriting something at a lower basis would probably be more beneficial for a rich person than for a poor person. So if anything, it probably helps. My guess is it would help poor people more, is to inherit it at the actual basis rather than to have to carry forward some weird wonky. But I mean, anything can be used or abused. You have more options when you're wealthy you have more options when you're wealthy. But I don't know if I would say that necessarily favors the rich.